Episode 25, Love Bombing and the Architecture of Cult Indoctrination. File Designation, Omega-7 Black. Clearance Level, Investigator Only. Static Interference. Typewriter Sound Effects. Pause 3 seconds. Narrator, VO. Cold, detached, clinical. Human identity is not a fortress. It is a fragile construct, held together by chemical responses, social validation, and the illusion of autonomy. You believe your choices are your own. You believe your loves, your fears, and your loyalties are organically formed. You are incorrect. Heavy bass drop ominous. Pause 2 seconds. Narrator, VO. In 1978, over 900 people willingly ingested cyanide in a Guyanese jungle. In 1969, an aspiring musician weaponized a group of middle-class youths into a synchronized killing machine in the Hollywood Hills. The uninitiated call this brainwashing. They treat it as a mystical, inexplicable phenomenon. But there is no magic here. There is only architecture. The meticulous, calculated architecture of the human mind, and the precise blueprints used to dismantle it. Visual CUE, fast-cut montage of archival footage: Jim Jones smiling, Manson staring into the camera, Heaven's Gate members in matching uniforms, transitioning into brain scan neuroimaging. Narrator, VO. Welcome to the Dark Psychology Factory. Today, we are opening the classified files on the most insidious weapon in the manipulator's arsenal, love bombing and the identity dissolution protocol. We will not give you the emotional testimonies of survivors. We will not dwell on the tragedy. Instead, we will dissect the methodology. We will analyze the psychological scalpels used to sever an individual from their reality. By the end of this broadcast, you will understand exactly how a human being is disassembled and rebuilt into a weapon. Title card along with piercing high-pitched tone. The Architecture of Obedience, Love Bombing and Cult Indoctrination. Pause 3 seconds. Narrator, VO. Act I, the neurochemical hijack. Every parasitic organism must bypass the host's immune system. In psychological warfare, the human immune system is skepticism and boundary enforcement. To bypass it, cult leaders deploy a tactic known as love bombing. Typewriter on screen, tactic designation: love bombing. Narrator, VO. The term is aggressively accurate. It is a bombardment. An overwhelming, coordinated assault of affection, flattery, validation, and simulated intimacy. When a target enters the ecosystem of a high-control group, they are not met with sinister demands. They are met with absolute, unconditional acceptance. This is not an accident. This is a targeted neurochemical attack. Visual CUE, diagram of the human brain, highlighting the amygdala and nucleus accumbens. Narrator, VO. Psychological evaluation files of cult recruiters reveal a precise targeting matrix. They look for transition states, individuals who have recently moved, suffered a breakup, lost a job, or experienced a death in the family. These states create a deficit in dopamine and oxytocin. The cult provides an instantaneous, massive infusion of these exact neurochemicals. The target's brain registers this artificial community as a biological necessity. The critical thinking faculties, primarily located in the prefrontal cortex, are suppressed by the overwhelming reward signaling in the limbic system. The host accepts the parasite. The boundaries fall. Pause 3 seconds. Narrator, VO. Act 2, the Identity Dissolution Protocol. Once the chemical dependency is established, the affection is abruptly withdrawn. This is the pivot. The bait has been taken, the hook is now set. The objective shifts from integration to isolation. Visual CUE, footage of individuals being separated into different rooms, sensory deprivation tanks, cold clinical environments. Narrator, VO. We have analyzed the operational manuals of over 50 documented high-control groups. The methodology is universally identical. It is a process of systematic ego death. First, information control. The target is isolated from their previous support structures. Friends and family are reframed as toxic or unenlightened. Second, physiological deprivation. Sleep is restricted. Diets are altered, typically shifting to low-protein, high-carbohydrate intake to induce chronic lethargy and suggestibility. Third, linguistic modification. When language shrinks, the capacity for independent thought shrinks with it. Pause 3 seconds. Narrator, VO. Act 3, the surveillance logs. To truly understand the granular, day-by-day destruction of a human psyche, we must look at the data. What follows is a synthesized classified log, reconstructed from psychiatric evaluations of rescued cult members. It tracks a timeline of absolute psychological subjugation. Listen to the metrics. Observe the decay of the self. Visual CUE, green phosphorus text scrolling on an ancient CRT monitor. Heartbeat monitor sound effect playing steadily in the background. Classified file insert, Omega Logs Phase 1, Acquisition. Log 001, target flooded with extreme validation. Heart rate elevated. Log 002, dopamine dependency confirmed. Subject exhibits withdrawal symptoms when isolated from leader. Log 003, subject shows significantly decreased resistance to absurd directives. Chemical dependency taking root. Log 004, target flooded with extreme validation. Cortisol levels stable but reliance increasing. Log 005, subject displays immense gratitude for the constructed environment. Log 006, target introduced to initial behavioral restrictions under the guise of enlightened discipline. Log 007, target flooded with extreme validation. Dopamine dependency firmly established. Log 008, subject severed from one primary external contact. No resistance observed. Log 009, chemical dependency deepens. Subject looks exclusively to the leader for all emotional cues. Log 010, subject expresses a profound desire to permanently remain within the controlled environment. Classified file insert, Omega Logs Phase 2, Isolation. Log 011, controlled environment isolation. Communication lines to external family aggressively severed. Log 012, prefrontal cortex activity suppressed. Subject demonstrates zero critical analysis of blatant contradictions. Log 013, sleep deprivation schedule initiated. REM sleep permanently interrupted at 90-minute intervals. Log 014, dietary restriction protocol. Caloric deficit initiated to lower cognitive resistance. Log 015, physical lethargy noted. Motor function severely slowed due to sustained, intentional caloric deficit. Log 016, sleep debt exceeds 40 hours. Dangerous microsleeps observed repeatedly. Log 017, isolation is absolute. Subject firmly believes the outside world is irredeemably corrupt. Log 018, information censorship. Strict confiscation of all non-approved reading materials, devices, and media. Log 019, subject displays extreme panic and anxiety when separated from the group. Log 020, the boundaries of the self have eroded. Subject refers to the collective identity exclusively. Log 021, controlled environment isolation maintained. Exhaustion clearly evident. Log 022, subject shows zero critical analysis. Identity dissolution process is progressing exactly on schedule. Log 023, sleep deprivation schedule maintained. Cognitive fog successfully induced. Log 024, information censorship enforced. Confiscation of all external stimuli complete. Log 025, subject firmly believes the outside world is plotting against them. Classified file insert, Omega Logs Phase 3, Ego Destruction and Trauma Bonding. Log 026, Guilt Induction and Public Confession. Subject coerced to admit to completely fabricated moral failings. Log 027, tear production continuous during confession phases. Emotional regulation mechanism severely compromised. Log 028, previous moral frameworks have been successfully and permanently overridden. Log 029, ego dismantling protocol. Subject's previous identity, career, and values systematically mocked and degraded. Log 030, trauma bonding initiation. Alternating cycles of extreme verbal abuse followed by sudden, intense affection. Log 031, massive adrenaline spikes recorded during unpredictable alternating threat/rescue behavioral simulations. Log 032, a classical trauma bond is forming rapidly. The subject views the abuser as the sole source of safety and survival. Log 033, guilt induction repeated. Subject believes they are inherently flawed and require the leader's purification. Log 034, ego dismantling protocol maintained. Subject actively participates in the degradation of their own past identity. Log 035, trauma bonding deepens. Subject exhibits physical withdrawal symptoms during abuse phases, instantly relieved by affection. Log 036, tear production continuous. The leader's doctrine is now the subject's baseline morality. Log 037, ego dismantling protocol. Subject refers to their past self in the third person with extreme disgust. Log 038, trauma bonding initiation. Subject forcefully defends the leader against simulated external criticisms. Log 039, massive adrenaline spikes recorded. Subject is entirely reliant on the leader's validation for physiological homeostasis. Log 040, a classical trauma bond is finalized. The subject is incapable of conceptualizing existence outside the bond. Classified file insert, Omega Logs Phase 4, total indoctrination. Log 041, loaded language indoctrination. Subject's baseline speech patterns now mimic the leader's exact cadence. Log 043, phobia indoctrination. Repeated exposure to fabricated narratives detailing extreme outside world hostility. Log 044, fight-or-flight response permanently active. Chronic induced stress successfully solidifying the trauma bond. Log 045, subject displays extreme panic and anxiety when presented with the concept of leaving. Subjugation is complete. Log 046, loaded language indoctrination maintained. All complex thought is immediately shut down by implanted catchphrases. Log 047, phobia indoctrination maintained. Subject views all non-members as active threats to their survival. Log 048, identity dissolution successfully achieved. The subject is now a fully functional, obedient extension of the leader's will. Log 049, final compliance check. Subject ordered to perform a highly degrading, nonsensical task. Execution immediate. Log 050, target finalized. The architecture of obedience is permanently installed. Static interference. Heavy mechanical clunk. Narrator, VO. Act 4, The Architects of Annihilation. The theoretical logs align perfectly with historical data. We turn our attention to two of the most proficient architects of identity dissolution, Jim Jones and Charles Manson. Visual CUE, side-by-side mugshots / portraits of Jones and Manson, devoid of color, heavily contrasted. Narrator, VO. Case File Alpha, Jim Jones and the People's Temple. Jones did not begin with poison. He began with radical inclusion. He targeted the disenfranchised of San Francisco, offering a socialist utopia. He weaponized racial integration and social justice as the ultimate love bomb. Once dependency was established, the protocol activated. He initiated White Knights, simulated crisis events requiring absolute obedience. He utilized public humiliation sessions, forcing members to confess fabricated sins. By the time the cyanide was distributed in Jonestown, the members did not have the psychological infrastructure required to refuse. Their survival instinct had been surgically removed and replaced with Jones's will. Jones understood that to break a human, you must first become their absolute sanctuary. He engineered artificial crises, simulated gunshots, fake poisonings, orchestrated attacks on the compound, only to dramatically save his followers. This is the apex of trauma bonding. The architect of the terror is simultaneously the savior from the terror. When the final command was given on November 18, 1978, it was not a mass panic. It was a synchronized execution of a program that had been installed over years of meticulous psychological grinding. Pause 3 seconds. Narrator, VO. Case File Beta, Charles Manson and the Family. Manson's methodology was different, utilizing chemical catalysts. He weaponized LSD, pairing hallucinogenic ego dissolution with intense, hypnotic repetition of his doctrines. Manson targeted the alienated youth of the late 1960s. He provided a mirror to their insecurities. He isolated them at Spawn Ranch, creating a closed-loop reality. The introduction of the helter-skelter apocalyptic narrative was the final locking mechanism. He created a terrifying external threat, positioning himself as the sole savior. The murders they committed were not acts of individual malice. They were the execution of a pre-programmed subroutine by subjects entirely stripped of their original consciousness. Manson utilized a specific neurochemical hack. He forced his followers to confront their deepest fears while under the influence of severe hallucinogens, and then he would provide the only source of comfort. He systematically erased the boundary between fear and love, until the two concepts became completely indistinguishable in the minds of his followers. Narrator, VO. Act V, the Bite model of authoritarian control. To fully conceptualize the destruction of the self, we must refer to the Bite model, developed by Dr. Stephen Hawson. Behavior, information, thought, and emotion. These are the four pillars of the human experience. The cult leader seeks absolute dominion over all four. Behavioral control is established through strict schedules, dietary modifications, and physical isolation. The subject's body is no longer their own, it is the property of the collective. Information control is achieved by demonizing external media. The leader becomes the sole arbiter of truth. Any contradictory data is immediately categorized as hostile propaganda. Thought control requires the installation of a new linguistic framework. The implementation of loaded language restricts the subject's ability to even conceptualize rebellion. If the words for freedom do not exist, freedom cannot be imagined. Finally, emotional control. The manipulation of guilt, fear, and love. The leader manufactures synthetic crises to keep the nervous system in a perpetual state of hyperarousal. The victim is trapped in a biological loop of terror and relief. Heavy bass drop. Narrator, VO. Act 6, The Modern Echo. The files are closed, but the machinery is still running. Do not make the mistake of believing these tactics died with Jones or Manson. The architecture of obedience has merely evolved. It is present in extreme political factions. It is present in corporate echo chambers. It is present in toxic, hyper-controlling domestic relationships. Love bombing is the gateway. Isolation is the lock. Identity dissolution is the permanent state. You are biological code. And code can be rewritten. Question your dependencies. Question your sudden devotions. Static escalates. Because the moment you believe you are immune, is the exact moment the programming begins. Abrupt cut to black. End of log. Image prompts for editing. 1. A vintage typewriter resting on a cold steel table in a dimly lit interrogation room, harsh top-down lighting, hyperrealistic, cinematic, 8K AR-16:9. 2. A human brain diagram glowing with neon green and toxic yellow energy around the prefrontal cortex, dark background, classified file aesthetic, medical textbook illustration style AR-16:9. 3. Abstract representation of love bombing, a single figure standing alone in the dark while hundreds of shadowy hands reach out to them offering glowing red, highly unnatural hearts. Unsettling, psychological horror, high contrast AR-16:9. 4. A person locked in a glass isolation box inside a massive, brutalist concrete room. Cold fluorescent lighting, oppressive atmosphere, cinematic depth of field AR-16:9. 5. A conceptual image of ego death, a person staring into a mirror, but their reflection is crumbling into digital ash and static noise. Cyberpunk psychological thriller style, dark green and black color palette AR-16:9. 6. A vintage 1970s CRT monitor displaying scrolling green text that reads, "Protocol initiated," sitting on a messy desk covered in redacted classified documents, photorealistic AR-16:9. 7. A massive crowd of faceless people standing in perfect, unsettling symmetry, all facing a single elevated podium that is shrouded in shadows, totalitarian aesthetic, muted colors AR-16:9. 8. A close-up of an eye, the pupil extremely dilated, reflecting a swirling vortex of psychedelic, hypnotic black and white patterns. Extreme macro photography, highly detailed AR-16:9. 9. A person attached to invisible puppet strings that extend up into the darkness, standing in a foggy, empty room, moody lighting, metaphorical, haunting AR-16:9. 10. Two Polaroid photos sitting on a steel desk. One shows Jim Jones in dark sunglasses, the other shows Charles Manson staring wildly. The photos are partially burnt at the edges. True crime documentary style AR-16:9. 11. A massive set of heavy steel vault doors slowly closing in a dark tunnel, trapping a single beam of light, representing absolute isolation, dramatic lighting AR-16:9. 12. A syringe filled with glowing pink liquid labeled dopamine, sitting next to a thick book titled Operational Manual, top-down view, clinical horror aesthetic AR-16:9. 13. A group of people sitting in a circle in a dark room, only illuminated by a single harsh spotlight in the center, suggesting an interrogation or forced confession session, high contrast shadows AR-16:9. 14. A conceptual image of the modern echo, a person mindlessly scrolling on a glowing smartphone, while dark, spectral chains extend from the screen and wrap around their wrists. Cyberdystopia, chilling AR-16:9. 15. A final wide shot of a classified file cabinet in a massive, endless, dark warehouse. The camera is pulling back. Mysterious, X-Files style atmosphere, fog rolling on the ground AR-16:9.